Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Feeding Frenzy. The Feeding Frenzy is my take on the things that I enjoyed in my week and hoping to pass along a little bit of my knowledge to you. In The Feeding Frenzy, you can expect four things, at least something worth listening to, worth reading, worth watching, and then worth thinking about. First up is worth listening to. This week's podcast is Dr. Anthony Daniels with Jordan Peterson. Dr. Anthony Daniels is a British writer and essayist. I found this particular conversation very interesting because it treads on territory that we normally don't really hear too much. And one of those being is with Anthony holding a position as a consulting physician in a prison and hospital in one of the poorest areas of London. And he shares many stories around how he interacted with inmates that would be counterintuitive to most of us. One such story that I didn't include in my writing, but I thought is worth bringing up here for you, is how he broached the topic so that inmates would not swear with him. How would you respond if I swore to you about giving you medicine? If you interacted with someone and every other word you said was the F word, would you respond positively to that? And in many ways, the way he sought to interact with his patients was to see them as equals, not to be seen as an object that required something to fix or that was beneath him. And then the other idea that I found was interesting was the idea of being too sentimental. Putting it as another way is, can you have too much empathy at the wrong time? And I'll leave that question hanging there. And if you listen to the conversation, I'm curious what you have to say around that. The next category is worth reading. This article is from Graham Duncan, and it's What's Going On Here with This Human. In this essay, Graham attempts to lay out ways of playing the game of life. How do you figure out people? It could be your parents, friends, your significant other, or even your boss. And the ability to assess people quickly is high on the list of qualities that can pay off big in your life. And I just found that this article to be a really effective mental model builder so that you can understand how to interact with people who may be vastly different than you. And here's a quote that I thought was really good. The risk of becoming too steeped in any one framework is that you start to be subject to that framework. You can only look through its lens and not at the lens. I recommend trying to hold a handful of frameworks in your mind simultaneously in order to maintain flexibility. If you're a longtime reader here, I really enjoy frameworks and creating basically a never-ending toolbox for you to be able to pull from given any situation. Because what we know about the changing world is that you can never use only one framework to make sense of all the complexities that we have to deal with in our lives. Third category, worth watching. Today's video is back on the engineering front with Why is the World Running Out of Computers? Polymatter. So a little bit of background here. The world has been suffering a shortage of CPUs since the middle of last year, roughly, if not longer than that. This video does a great job of laying out what the problem is and why we are not seeing a drastic rebound since the world has started to open up. Some of the big answers here is that it's demand rebound, which means that even though we are now seeing people want to buy things again that require CPUs, such as automobiles, which for those of you might be counterintuitive, but again, the video goes into great detail here. The other part of this is that manufacturers of semiconductor material don't really have a quick way to meet demand because any order can actually take anywhere from 3 to 6 months for it to start production and get out of the facility, which is a very long production cycle. The problem itself has an even further ramification, which is that getting into manufacturing of semiconductors is very difficult. It can cost anywhere from millions and millions of dollars to start any of these factories. Unless we can come up with a breakthrough that can make the entire process more efficient, we're stuck with the companies we already have. So again, this is a really interesting area to look at, but also it explains why the world is in the current state that it is. And the fourth category, worth pondering, is where I share a quote with no context and hopes to leave you thinking about what it means for you. And so today's quote is from Kurt Vonnegut, and here we go. And I urge you to please notice when you are happy and exclaim or murmur or think at some point, if this isn't nice, I don't know what is. And with that concludes edition 20 of the Feeding Frenzy. And I hope you all enjoyed this. If you found any of this interesting or thought there was a dot to connect to any of these things that I shared, please feel free to reach me on the internet. You can find Feeding Curiosity all over the interwebs, be it Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or the website itself. Please feel free to shoot me a message and let me know any and all of your thoughts. I'd greatly appreciate it. You can also find more of Feeding Curiosity in other places. Feeding Curiosity is primarily a podcast, and you can find us on all of your favorite podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast, and all others. And otherwise, you can find more content over at feedingcuriosity.net, where you can find more Feeding Frenzies like this. And last but not least, you can also check out a different style of blog called The Blueprint. Right now, we are exploring the book Range by David Epstein, which is Why Generalists Succeed in a Specialized World. And that's my take on breaking down a book and making it more accessible, but providing a breadcrumb trail for the reader to explore the parts of the book that they find most interesting to them. And so with that, everyone, I will see you all next week in the next edition of the Feeding Frenzy.